That's a good start. So just to say, brilliant to see so many people here. Hopefully we'll be able to shed a bit of light on our very confusing benefits system. I was supposed to be delivering this presentation with a colleague. Unfortunately, Lawrence has had to cancel at the last minute, so it's just me, but that's fine. So with no further ado, bit of housekeeping. Jay?
So with regards to housekeeping, I would encourage you to keep the cameras on. We want to see those beautiful faces. However, if you'd prefer to turn your camera off, that is absolutely fine. As I say, though, if you could please keep your volume on mute. Any questions that you'd like asked to Rachel, if you could please put them in the chat box and I will then relay the question. You can use the closed captions facility by clicking on the CC button at the bottom of the screen. Whether that CC captions button deciphers this thick Welsh accent remains to be seen, but I'm sure it will do a fantastic job of captioning Rachel's presentation. The session will be recorded, but not the Q&A session, and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel if you'd like to watch it again in due course. And answers to questions can't be used as specific advice. I just have to put that because obviously Rachel can share her knowledge and her expertise, but she's unaware of individual cases and case history, etc. So questions can be answered, but I wouldn't be using it as specific advice. So that's the housekeeping, and now over to the expert that is Rachel Ingleby. Thank you, Rachel.
All right, just to start by saying nobody's an expert in this stuff because it's awful and confusing. We actually, I work for a team called the Expert Advice Team. We actually call ourselves the so-called Expert Advice Team. So just to give you a bit of an overview of our benefit system. So our benefit system in the UK, and I'm mainly going to cover benefits administered by the Department of Works and Pensions and some benefits administered by local authorities. It's a very confusing benefit system because there's lots of different types of benefits, and I don't think anybody intends for it to be a very complicated system. It has just evolved in that way because it's evolved in a kind of mismatch of lots of different benefits being introduced while some benefits are still existing, and there's also been attempts to simplify the benefit system that unfortunately have often made it more complicated. So what I try and do is just give you a kind of overview of what benefits are available, and what kind of criteria you might need to satisfy to qualify for those benefits. So the main types of benefits that we have, just to give you a kind of very brief overview, is contributory benefits, which are national insurance benefits. I'll explain a bit more about those. Disability and carer and child benefits, which are types of benefits that you qualify for if you satisfy certain conditions. Means tested benefits, which are benefits that you have to satisfy a financial means test to qualify for. And non-welfare benefits, which I won't cover in as much detail, but that's more things, discretionary schemes, charitable help, things like the Blue Badge scheme as well. I don't really specialise as much in those types of benefits, but it's important you have an awareness of them because they can be quite useful. Sometimes you can get grants and sometimes you can get discretionary payments through all sorts of schemes, so it's worth considering them. So if we look first of all at contributory benefits, those are benefits, the first type of welfare benefits we ever had, really. They were your national insurance benefits, the sort of old Attlee kind of idea that you pay in your national insurance stamp and then you get some benefits back if you're unemployed or you're ill or when you retire. So good examples of that is your retirement pension, contributory sickness benefit, which is now called employment support allowance, and a contributory unemployment benefit, which is now called job seekers allowance. And these benefits are not means tested, but they might be affected by earnings or pensions, or sometimes they might overlap with other benefits. And historically, apart from the retirement pension, these benefits have become less, have kind of been eroded. They're now more time limited, and also they pay quite lower amounts really. And even with retirement pension, we can see that it's getting harder to get your retirement pension really, because your retirement age is being moved upwards. So the next category of benefits, disability carers and child benefits. These benefits are normally not means tested, although there are sometimes earnings limits. For instance, there is an earnings limit for child benefit and for carers allowance. And they're normally dependent on satisfying certain conditions. So that might be having a disability, being a carer, or having responsibility for a child. The main disability benefits that some of you might have heard of or have experience of claiming: a personal independence payment, which is the main disability benefit payable now for adults under pension age, attendance allowance for adults over pension age, and disability living allowance for children under 16. Means tested benefits. So means tested benefits are benefits where you have to satisfy a means test. So it depends on any earnings of capital and income which you and normally a partner that you live with would claim. And the type of means tested benefit that you might be entitled to depends on whether you're above or below pension age, and if you've got a partner, whether they are above or below pension age. So if you're above pension age, you normally be claiming a benefit called state pension credit, and you might, if you have rental costs, be claiming pension age housing benefit. If you're below pension age, the main means tested benefit now is universal credit, and that's replacing previous means tested benefits, which we now call legacy benefits. And some people are still in receipt of these benefits, like income support, income related, ESA, housing benefit. Tax credits have now, there shouldn't now be anybody claiming tax credits. I think they've all been transferred to universal credit and income based JSA. So people on these legacy benefits are gradually being transferred onto universal credit. Sometimes that happens by accident because someone has a change of circumstance and they have to claim universal credit. But if you don't have a change of circumstance, that means you have to claim universal credit. You will eventually be migrated to universal credit by the DWP, and that's an ongoing process at the moment. Non-welfare benefits. I'm not covering these in detail, but I do think they're important to know about. I'm not council tax discounts and rebates. Council tax benefit, I'm not really going to cover in any detail because for working age people, council tax rebates now being localised, so it's really hard to specialise in all the different schemes. For pension age claimants, it's a more standardised benefit. It's one of the most underclaimed benefits, actually, council tax rebate. So it's a means tested benefit. Council tax discounts are slightly different. They can sometimes reduce your council tax liability, but I think if anybody feels that they might be entitled to some discount or rebate from on their council tax, I would certainly say to get in touch with your local authority. So also things like blue badge scheme, free school meals, discretionary hardship payments. Some charities provide grants, particularly for one-off items. That can be quite useful. There used to be something called the Family Fund that used to be available as one-off grants for disabled children. So there's lots of non-statutory help, often in the charitable sector or from local authorities, which if you look, I'm assuming we're going to be sharing these slides at the end of the presentation, but there's a charity that has a good website about benefit entitlement called Turn to Us, and it has a specific section just on grants and discretionary help. I definitely recommend people have a look at that. So just to go into a bit more detail about some of the benefits that I've mentioned, I'm assuming actually that one of the benefits that people might be interested in are disability benefits. So these are the benefits that were on the earlier slide, like personal independence payment, attendance allowance, and disability living allowance. So you probably, as I said, which of these benefits you need to claim will probably depend on your age. DLA for children, attendance allowance if you're over pension age, personal independence payment if you're of working age up to pension age. There are exceptions to that. If you've been claiming personal independence payment and then you become a pensioner, you can continue to receive it after reaching pension age. So these three benefits are claimed via a claim form, and they're none of them are means tested, which means you can be a millionaire and claim any of these benefits, actually. They're a very useful supplement to people's income, and sometimes they can act as a kind of a passport to other kinds of help. So, for instance, things like the enhanced rate of PIP mobility would probably give you access to a blue badge. It also can give you entitlement to extra kind of premiums in means tested benefits. So they're really useful benefits, and they're underclaimed as well. PIP and disability living allowance have a care and a mobility part, which means that you might be entitled to them if you have care needs and mobility difficulties. Attendance allowance is all about care needs. It doesn't have a mobility part to it, I think, because they assume that it would be too expensive to pay a mobility component to the vast majority of people over pension age. So for PIP, you actually qualify by scoring points for not being able to perform either care-related activities or mobility-related activities. So that's things like dressing, eating, communicating, socializing for the care part. And for the mobility part, it might be because you've got a physical disability that affects your ability to walk, or it might be that you have a mental health issue that affects your ability to actually make progress outside or to get from one destination to another. You need at least 8 points in either total care activities or mobility activities to get an award. For attendance allowance and disability living allowance, entitlements based on what we would regard as disability tests. What that means is you either have to have for DLA care needs or mobility problems. Now, the care needs relate either to attention needed in relation to bodily functions or supervision to keep you safe. And you don't actually have to be having that care or supervision provided. It is actually that you have a need for that care or supervision. For attendance allowance, it is just the care part of that test. And it is, again, if you have attention needs or supervision needs. Lots of people, actually older people, get attendance allowance because of falling. My dad, for instance, when he got to about 80, started falling, and although he didn't have someone with him all day, he was theoretically at risk all day because there wasn't much he could do to stop himself falling. and he got attendance allowance on that basis. I think lots of people think that you can't get attendance allowance unless you need help all day and you actually have someone there providing care for you. That is not the case. It is actually a kind of objective assessment of your need, not actually the reality of whether you actually get care on an everyday basis. For all of these three benefits, the disability has to apply for a minimum period. So it's not a good, these are not good benefits for people with short-term disabilities, even if they're very severe disabilities, unless it's a terminal illness, which is, I think, a bit of a complaint about this benefit. If you had a very sudden severe illness that only maybe affected you for a relatively short period of time, you would have difficulty claiming these benefits. All except attendance allowance, you have to have had the disability for at least 3 months. For attendance allowance, it's 6 months, and then you have to be likely to continue to satisfy those disability conditions for another 6 months. Just to say, PIP has a very high success rate at appeal. I mention that because it has a less successful rate at the first decision-making stage, and then there's a second decision-making stage called a mandatory reconsideration. If you claim PIP and been refused, you should follow all the way through to an appeal, because it's like something like a 70 or 80% success rate at appeal. And lots of people give up after they've kind of been refused, but it's not, the accuracy of the decision making at the first stage is not good. Attendance allowance has a higher success rate at the first stage, the claim stage, but filling in the claim form is really crucial. The main difficulty that I see with attendance allowance claims that aren't successful is you've actually asked the old person whether they need any help, and they've just ticked that they can do everything, and you've not, you need to, if I'd let my dad fill in that form, he'd just have said, oh, I can do this, I can do that. He'd never mentioned any of his risks or anything that he struggled with, or the fact that every time he used to go to his house, he used to be throwing food out of his fridge and, clearing things up that he hadn't noticed and noticing where he'd fallen all week. So filling in the attendance allowance form and detailing people's actual care needs that they have, rather than what they're receiving help for, and mentioning any risks that someone might have, particularly from falling, or if they're not eating, or memory lapses, that's crucial to success with attendance allowance, really. Right, carers allowance, this is a bit more detail about attendance allowance. So it's a non-means tested benefit, but it does have an earnings limit. That's gone up a bit more this year. I think it's £196 at the moment, but it's actually been quite a low earnings limit, and some people have been caught out with overpayments for carers allowance. It's paid in addition to most other benefits, but it's taken into account fully for means tested benefits like universal credit, and it overlaps with contributory benefits like retirement pension and New Style ESA and the contributory JSA. So you have to care for a disabled person who's in receipt of one of the benefits that I just mentioned previously, the care component of either the middle or the high rate of DLA care component, or any rate of attendance allowance, or the care component of PIP. And you have to be caring for the disabled person for at least 35 hours a week, and you can't be a full-time student. But it's a very useful benefit, and actually if you claim universal credit, although it is taken into account as income for universal credit, you get a carer's element added onto your universal credit for caring for it, and it also gives you a class 1 national insurance stamp as well if you claim it. So universal credit, which is now the main means tested benefit for working age people, and that's replaced what we call legacy benefits, like income support, income related, ESA, and also working age housing benefit. So it's a means tested benefit. So how much you're entitled to depends on your financial situation. It can be paid if you're ill, or if you're in work, or if you're a carer. It can be claimed in addition to contribution-based benefits like New Star Contributory ESA and JSA, but they're taken into account. They count as income for universal credit. It can be claimed in addition to disability benefits like PIP, and PIP isn't taken into account as income, so you get your PIP on top of universal credit. The UC award is made up of lots of different elements depending on your circumstances. So there's elements for having children, or a housing element if you have housing costs. There's a carer's element if you're a carer. If you are ill and you are assessed as having limited capability for work-related activity, there's a limited capability for work-related activity element that's payable. So those elements then make up your maximum universal credit, and then that maximum amount's reduced by most types of income, but not all types of income. And then what's left is your universal credit. And if you have earnings, if you have limited capability for work, or you have children, you have a work allowance applied to those earnings. So some of those earnings are fully disregarded, and then there's a taper applied, an earnings taper. So it is a benefit that is designed more, I think, to support people in work than people who are unable to work. But it applies, it is the main means tested benefit whether you're in work or not now. So is there a way to maximise universal credit entitlement? Yes, there is, because as I've said, this benefit's made up of different elements. So if you can gain entitlement to some increased elements, that will increase your maximum universal credit, and that means that whatever income you have coming in erodes your entitlement less. So gaining entitlements to limited capability for work-related activity element, even if you're in work, you can get a fit note and ask the DWP to assess you under the work capability assessment. And if you have limited capability for work, you will be afforded a work allowance. If you have limited capability work-related activity, you get an extra amount added into your maximum universal credit. So most people, even if they're working, can ask for a work capability assessment, although there is an earnings limit if you're not getting PIP, which is equal to 16 times the minimum wage. But it's something that a lot of disabled workers don't think about asking for, and quite a lot of people could be increasing their entitlement to universal credit by asking for a work capability assessment. A carer's element's payable if someone's entitled in the benefit household is entitled to carer's allowance, even if you're not claiming carer's allowance. If you're providing care to a disabled person with disability benefits, a carer's element may be payable, and disabled child elements can be paid if you have children who are in receipt of disability living allowance. So just to mention a little bit about managed migration, because I don't know whether anybody here is currently going through this process, but it's certainly causing people a lot of anxiety. So at the moment, people on working age means tested legacy benefits, and in particular, claimants of income related ESA are being moved over to universal credit via a process called managed migration. Now, our advice to most people is that people should wait, if possible, until they're notified by the DWP before moving over to universal credit. unless they're better off at the moment on universal credit. If you know already you're going to be better off on universal credit, you should claim that benefit before the DWP asks you to migrate to that benefit. But if not, you should wait to claim universal credit until you receive what's called a managed migration notification, because you might get transitional protection if your universal credit is going to be less than your legacy benefits, but you won't if you jump the gun and you claim universal credit before you receive that notice. And you might want to get in touch with someone from the Help to Claim service to help you through the managed migration process, because that's what Help to Claim's there for. And a lot of the advisors there have a lot of information about how to maximise your entitlement through managed migration. So, top tips for claiming correct benefit entitlement. So this is just my top tips. It's not any kind of universal truth to these, but yeah, this is based on my 33 years of experience. So the benefit system is really complicated. So if you can get advice from someone like me, that would be really good, because it's really difficult to get, to maximise your benefit entitlement without proper advice. But if you're in doubt about whether you might be entitled to something, my advice would be to have a go and claim. You've normally nothing to lose from claiming. There's a lot more underclaiming than overclaiming with the benefit system. I mean, I think Policy and Practice estimates something like 2 billion benefits underclaimed in this country. So it's certainly worth you having a go at claiming something, even if you're refused. Bear in mind, you might have to appeal. We have a good appeal system relating to benefits. It's a very, very good system, actually, and it has a very high success rate, and it's actually one you can normally navigate by yourself. I would definitely ask for an oral hearing if you're going to appeal any lost benefit entitlement, because you're much more likely to win at an oral hearing. Paper hearings, you're much less likely to be successful. Tribunals are very geared up to helping people at appeals. I'm going to share a resource which can help you prepare your own benefit appeal, which I think is a good resource. I mean, it's great if you can get representation, but increasingly people might find, a lot of advice organisations are unfortunately unable to provide that. So I'm just sharing some resources where you might be able to get more help. So advice centres, obviously, local citizens advice. A lot of local authorities have advice services. Community centres. A lot of charities often have good websites that have info about benefits. And also Turn To Us and Entitled To have benefit calculators on their websites and lots of information about benefits. Advice Now is an organisation that provides free legal advice in the form of packs, and that has some packs like how to prepare your PIP appeal, how to prepare your DLA appeal. They're really good, and they're very claimant centred, and they can guide you through the appeals process. And when they have written these advice guides, they've actually come to people like me and said, what are your top tips for appeals? And they actually listen, when you sort of give advice. So they're very good guides. Citizens Advice has a public site. Our advice is fine. It's not always very detailed, because we kind of have to situate it at a level where we hope people can understand it. So you're not going to get great detail from that, but it will give you a good overview, I hope. Advisor Online is something that is open to the public, where me and my colleagues in the so-called expert advice team publish articles on benefits, housing, immigration, consumer law, family law. and you can actually access those, and they're on all sorts of things, not just benefits. But it's a free website, and it's really good. It's really good advice, and underutilized because we don't pay to put it to the top of Google. So yeah, you're finding out about something quite precious, but that people know not much about. Here are some helpful phone numbers. That's the PIP claim line and the DLA and attendance allowance claim line, and the links to claiming ESA and universal credit and pension credit. So, and as I say, I think these slides will be sent out with the links. And there we go.